Field of Studies Subcommittee meeting. It's February 18th, 2016. And so let's go through the, first of all, we're going to go, there's an agenda item here where when we speak to we'll speak to the item numbers on the printed agenda. So let's move on to item number 2, where we're going to do the welcome. So Dan and I have been our co-chairs of this committee, and we have participated in the earlier rounds of the field of study for all of engineering. And now we're focusing in on a few disciplines, the field of study for engineering, and so chemical engineering is a field of study that we're charged with exploring today. So let me welcome our new members to the committee, and why don't we start down at the end and introduce yourself and give us your background. And oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, Matthew Alexander with A&M Kingsville in chemical engineering. I'm a first-time faculty there as of last August, and have previously spent 25 years in industry.
I'm Margaret Wade. I'm the Dean of Math, Science, and Kinesiology at Midland College. I've been a dean now over 20 years.
My name is Dan Lindley. I'm a chemical engineer and chemist. I teach at Del Mar College, and I think right now I'm the only community college person teaching chemical engineering, at least to my knowledge.
Hey, I'm John Eckert. I'm Associate Dean for Research at the University of Texas in the Cockrell School of Engineering, and I'm also a faculty member in the Department of Chemical Engineering.
Mindy Nobles, Program Director with the Coordinating Board, serving as key staff to the engineering field of study effort.
Gary Tomerlin, Deputy Assistant Commissioner of Workforce here at the Coordinating Board.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So we need to, we have to have a recording secretary, and we have to elect this individual, and there are 2 choices here.
We could nominate both of them, couldn't we?
And I will dive in and say this, if I may, John. It would help to document this effort if we had someone serving as recording secretary. If one of our 2 committee members who are not co-chairs would like to volunteer, I would be grateful. If neither of you feel inclined to do so, we can develop minutes from the recording of this meeting. But would one of you care, do one of you have a particular talent for taking notes?
Sure, I'll give it a try.
Well, thank you, Matthew. I appreciate it.
Okay, well, by acclamation, we will allow you to serve as the recording secretary. Thank you. So were you going to discuss the charge to the committee? Thank you.
Gary and I will go through the resources you have on the table here before you, and Gary will give the charge to the committee. And we will as well provide you with a little background on field of study effort to date. And let me just begin with your packet here headed by the agenda. I will go to the 3rd page that takes you to the field of study statute, Texas Education Code 61823. I won't go through the entire statute, but we'll point out 3 salient areas. One, Section A, I will note, requires the coordinating board, with the advice of faculty experts in the field, to develop fields of study for use across institutions in the state. Sections B and C get down to the heart of how the statute operates. If a student completes a field of study curriculum at a community college, the receiving institution must accept those courses for transfer and apply those courses for credit toward the major. If a student completes part of a field of study, the courses that have been completed must be applied and credit toward the major. And I'll point out Section C to you, I'm sorry, E, which is new with the 84th legislature. We shall periodically review each field of study to update it with academic and industry needs in mind and student needs. Now, this is underway with engineering. We have an existing field of study from 2002, and you see in rather small print, well, no, I take that back. We have not supplied you with the original 2002 field of study. We can pull that up during the day if you would like to see it. The 2002 field of study has been sitting there since the early 2000s, and the main committee for engineering field of study has been working on a revision since last March now. The committee recommended a proposed field of study in August that consisted of Calc 1, 2, and 3 and University Physics 1 and 2. Put out for public comment, it inspired some fairly strong reaction from the field, mostly community colleges, also some universities, that it needed to have more in it. It needed to have some engineering courses. Students needed to be able to take more at the community college level to keep them on track with their counterparts at 4 years. In response to input from the field, the main committee, the Engineering Field of Study Committee, created 4 subcommittees for the most frequently majored in disciplines across the state, chemical being one of them. So here we are today. Now, Gary will deliver your charge to you. You see it up on the screen. This is the charge to the main committee, and we will take you to the subcommittee specific charge.
Thanks, Mindy. And let me kind of sidetrack for just a minute. You know, Mindy did a great job of kind of catching you up, hopefully filling you in on this work. But, you know, we know this is time consuming to travel here, to take out of your teaching load or your administrative load. And we also know this is a complex conversation. I mean, quite frankly, if it was easy, we would do it. But that's why we have offloaded it to you or asked you to participate in the process. But fields of study are important because we live in a world to where what we used to call traditional students and non-traditional students, either those have flip-flopped or they're very close to flip-flopping, because 50% of the higher ed students in Texas start at a community college today. 74% of all of the students in Texas who get a bachelor's degree have earned hours at a community college, and 40% of those bachelor's degree students have over 30 hours. So we really have to move the conversation kind of beyond transferring, and we have to start talking about what applies, you know, what's really helps the student sequence and transition from a community college into a bachelor's degree program. And so, as Mindy said, the whole engineering committee tackled the initial conversation, and Rex said this, and since Rex is not here, I will lay this off on him. But he said perhaps we erred when we named one engineering committee to talk about the complex differences of the different programs in engineering. And he gave an example of natural science. If you try to do a field of study in natural science, it would probably be very challenging, because natural science, depending on what you're going to do, looking for commonality would be challenging, because if you're going to be a biologist, you need biology courses. If you're going to be a geologist, you know, so forth and so on. But anyway, with that said, I really want to reiterate the thanks and the appreciation. And with that, the charge, which is up on the board.
I move to the specific committee charge.
Pardon me?
Move to the specific committee charge.
Well, the whole committee is charged with identifying the sequence of courses as outlined by statute. And then your task here is to look at, it's chemical.
Chemical, yes.
Chemical, okay. Okay. You're civil people, but But, you know, it's looking at the courses for chemical or civil, no, civil, as, yeah, civil has already met. As discussed, this is the third of 4 initial disciplines, trying to find pathways within the larger engineering field. Your job is to identify a sequence of courses, and then your work will go back to the larger committee, and then ultimately those recommendations will go to the board at some point.
And apologies for the erroneous heading there. And for the record, this is the Chemical Engineering Field of Study Subcommittee. That old heading of civil there is erroneous. The charge is the same across committees, so you have the accurate charge up there on screen.
And I guess if you have any questions of me after all of that, I'll be glad to jump in, try to tackle it. Okay.
Let me go on from there to walk you through the operational parts of your packet here. You're charged with, just to get to the language, you're charged with considering a chemical engineering track within the field of study for engineering, considering the courses in the proposed field of study proposed by the main committee, and the work of the compact or tuning, voluntary compact tuning committees that took place in 2011, 2012. With that charge in mind, what we provided you on the pages that follow are the recommendations of the Engineering Field of Study Advisory Committee, Calc 1, 2, and 3, University Physics 1 and 2, and a proposed statement to accompany it. We have also provided in, unfortunately, small print, we can get this enlarged for you if you'd like, the curriculum that the Tuning Committee for Chemical Engineering developed in 2011 or 2012. And let me ask you, Dan and John, did either of you sit on that committee?
We both did.
You both did?
On the tuning committee.
On the Tuning Committee.
I did not sit on the tuning committee.
Nor did I.
Okay, thank you. That would be a good resource to have here at this meeting. Okay, and the other excerpt from the tuning document is simply the prerequisite flow chart. That is the back of your agenda packet. Now, we have also provided you with the report of the Tuning Committee for Electrical Engineering, completed May 2012, and that was under a Lumina grant operated by the coordinating board during those years. So that completes your orientation to what you have here before you as resources from the coordinating board. And before we move on into agenda item 5, which is the substance of your discussion today, let me just ask Matthew and Margaret, do you have any questions? Thank you. And John, I will turn it over to you. You may want to go over this spreadsheet we have here and explain it.
Well, Dan's going to take over for a little bit here.
Okay, before we started, John and I did have a discussion as co-chairs about kind of how we'd like to be looking at this. And so there's a couple of points here we'd like to make sure is clear to all of us. This is student-centered, okay? We're trying to make sure that we keep our students from being disadvantaged, and I think it was very eloquently said by Gary. We're doing this to help our students. And it's true that in many community colleges, we have students who are first-time students, and we have many students at Del Mar who have parents that never had high school. So this is a track for us to get bright, good, engaged students moving on to the college, the four-year institution. And again, as I think Gary alluded to, something that's very important to us, we want to make sure that the students are not disadvantaged. They need to be able to enter without severe disadvantage with the cohort, their natural cohort that's going to occur at the four-year institution. And also the other thing is, as Gary mentioned, I'm just repeating a lot of what you said. I'm sorry about that, Gary, and you did a good job.
Thank you.
It provides good guidance Because up to now, we've been using the tuning study to help guide us, which is great, but those have not been signed by everybody, and mostly those go through the articulation agreement route. And the other thing which is very important to us is we want to make sure we accommodate the receiving institution's critical program elements. In looking at surveying the 7 colleges, public universities rather, that offer chemical engineering, there are some, shall we say, disagreements, that's too strong of a word, but there's departures from the tuning study. And so from our field of study perspective, I think we want to be able to acknowledge those and work with those too. So I think personally this is going to be a very good process. I think we're going to come out with a good outcome. My hope is we can do it today and get it done so we don't have to meet again.
Okay, would you like to discuss this table because it was somehow motivated by you?
Thank you, John. Well, the table here, what I did basically is I went to the 7 institutions in Texas that do offer a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. You'll see John's School, UT, University of Houston, Texas A&M University, Lamar, Texas A&M University, Kingsville, Prairie View, Texas Tech, and I think that's it, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yes. Also, we have the tuning study, which is laid next to it. And the tuning study was a very, very, I think, an excellent effort. It was, the people participating in it was University of Texas, Texas A&M, University, I gave away my list to you, so I can't list all who was in it, but it was a fine coalition of universities. Oh, thank you. I think on page, there we go.
19.
Well, this one here is on page 2. It was Texas A&M University. It was Blinn College, Kingsville, Prairie View A&M, Texarkana, Austin Community College, University of Houston, University of Texas, Lamar, and Texas Tech. And so it was a fine representation across the state. Okay, so what you see here before we get started is basically what I could gather from the first 2 years program. So this is what of course, our charge as community colleges is to provide the first 2 years where appropriate, and then being able to advise our students to transfer on to the 4-year school. So this is basically where we are in terms of, so I think, John, if it makes sense, maybe I'll just walk through what the tuning study was saying first.
Please do.
And because some of that stuff we're going to have a disagreement with, I'm absolutely certain of that. The tuning study was, and again, these are voluntary articulation agreements, Chem 1411 and 1412, which is the first year of inorganic chemistry, Organic 1 and Organic 2, which is recommended by the American Chemical Society as your second year of studying chemistry. Obviously, nothing in here about physical chemistry because that would be a junior level course. So it stopped there, organic chemistry. In physics, Physics 1 and Physics 2, these are the university physics, not college physics. And also in all the institutions, it involves a lab too, just make sure that's clear. In mathematics, we start to see a little bit of divergence. And from the tuning study, there was calculus 1, 2, and 3, differential equations. And as we talk through this, we'll see that one of the places where the 4-year schools are trying to save some hours for the students is kind of compressing that a little bit. I do want to say that, and maybe you can speak to this, Gary, because I think this is an important point. When we met as the Field of Study Committee originally, there was a recognition that if you take the 3-semester sequence of calculus at the community college, that we would be able to transfer that as the field of study, but it would transfer hours downwards. Could you speak to that, please?
Well, as discussed, the community colleges have 3 calculus courses that are normally 4 hours each. The universities have 2 calculus courses that are normally 4 hours each. And from the larger committee, the consensus was that the broad topics were in the community college pathway and the university pathway. And then, so that was agreed as an accommodation from the university side, that they wouldn't have to count 12 hours, they would have to count the 8 hours because it's a replace. And I believe the recommendation was to have some type of recommendation or footer or caption on the final document that is published. And these are really not for us as college administrator folks. These are for 8th graders and their parents to use and read and understand. But I think the recommendation is going to be that there's a sequence, either complete the community college sequence or complete the university sequence, because you can't divide the university 4 and then go back at the community college. I guess you'd have to do the 2 and 3 and all that kind of stuff. So you either need to do this pathway or that pathway.
And just to speak to that one more time, we had very clear guidance from Texas A&M, from UT, from various people that, for instance, they would really recommend you finish the physics sequence all at once. It's very difficult, and the same thing's true is going to be for organic when we talk about it. It's difficult to go from one book to another where all the topics are necessarily the same, but you're going to have a different sequence of how they're taught. So the strong committee recommendation was to complete the sequence wherever you started. Okay, so thank you very much. So calculus 1, 2, and 3 differential equations, and then the engineering side of it, which again is going to show some divergence. There was intro to engineering, and then programming, engineering programming, and then a recommendation for the chemical engineering pathway was to take electrical circuits, static and dynamics, then the 2 traditional chemical engineering courses, Intro to Chemical Engineering and Thermodynamics. So that's basically where the tuning study was. And so what I tried to do, as best I could, no guarantees on perfection here, but I tried to map everything where it would occur along the tuning study line or outline.
And I will add, Dan, to the 2 new committee members that next to each institution's mapped curriculum, mapped to the tuning curriculum, you see declared ACGM equivalents. Now, these are courses that the institution itself has declared and reported to the Texas Common Core numbering system to be equivalent to the ACGM course you see represented for the tuning curriculum at left.
And if I can add one little point, and Dan, you used the word sequencing a couple of times, and I talked about the importance of not just courses transferring, but applying. Sequencing is a very important word. I mean, obviously, we know that engineering is an inverted degree. It's my understanding that the universities have core courses in the senior year because you have to start taking the engineering sequence early on. And so that's one reason why this type of work is so important. We're also working on the music field of study, and it's a very similar kind of curriculum to where you've got to get in there and start learning the instruments. And for myself, it would probably be an 8-year degree at best, but even then that's probably optimistic. But you've got to start learning the instruments and building the expertise to move on through the sequence of courses. And so sequencing is an important conversation as well as students get ready to, and you know, I talked about community colleges and universities. We really kind of need to also go back and pick up the dual credit piece, so we have that graying of high school, if you will, the graying of the community college piece and the graying of the university piece into one pathway, and trying to help the students understand the correct sequence is, I think, embedded in this work.
So, thank you. And I have a question about this spreadsheet that we have, or this table that was prepared. When the fields are gray, a dark gray, Mindy, what does that refer to, please?
That indicates that the school, the 4-year, has not declared an ACGM equivalent out of its own body of courses.
All right, so, and then my next question is, will this spreadsheet be entered in somehow into the record?
It will. It will be posted online in the engineering FOS page along with your minutes ultimately.
Okay, so I think I'd like to make a few more sort of general comments about the general engineering field of study meetings that were held earlier this year that arrived at this limited number of calculus and physics courses. And the discussion, and I think this is relevant as we begin, maybe we'll just start with chemistry as an example here, or we should start with chemistry to consider what could or could not be in the field of engineering, chemical engineering field of study, was that when you pick a course and then you look across many of the four-year schools, because we were trying to shoehorn things into many different disciplines, not every discipline may even require chemistry, as an example, if we're going to talk about, as we talk about chemistry first. And so yes, chemistry is a useful course to have, and chemistry is on a field of study for at least chemical engineering, but at my campus, electrical and computer engineering doesn't require any chemistry. And so the challenge that we faced when we had all of the engineering disciplines was, one or more disciplines may require that at each of our institutions, the four-year institutions, but integrated across the spectrum of all disciplines, those courses, we wouldn't be able to receive them and apply them toward a degree. And so this is why we end up with this discipline-specific fields of study. So with that in mind, then, I think, why don't we look at the four courses that appear on the tuning study, and so I guess we're really discussing, what section are we on? What number?
This is to 5.
We're on agenda item 5.
Okay, I'm sorry, we're on agenda item 5. We're still on agenda item 5. I wanted to get this straight. So I think the issues here are what anyone would call first-year chemistry and second-year chemistry, and this is the ACGM courses in question are 1411, 1412 for Inorganic 1 and Inorganic 2, and the ACGM courses 2423 and 2425, which respectively correspond to Organic Chemistry 1 and Organic Chemistry 2. So when I look across the course, I mean the departments, the universities, not the departments, the universities, one of the things I will note for the University of Texas at Austin is that we have an expectation that students will arrive on our shores with the equivalent of Chemistry 301, either because they've taken an AP course or they've done work in high school that allows them to test out of this. And so it's a requirement to take subsequent courses in chemical. You have to show competency in this, but we do not count it toward a degree. Mm-hmm. And so adding it to the list of the field of study, then we would be against that, because then it's not part of our degree plan.
Can I speak to that real
Yes,
quickly?
please.
Okay, I just want to reiterate and talk a little bit more generally about what John is mentioning. If you have 2 chemistry courses, your first 2 intro chemistry courses, as part of the field of study, University of Texas is required to accept 8 hours of coursework. And so what they would have to do at that point is find 4 other hours in their field of study, which they could substitute for that. And I think that's kind of isn't that a legal position there, Gary, that they would have to do that?
Well, yes. I mean, as Mindy kind of briefed you on the statute, and the 2 most important paragraphs in 6.1.823 is B and C. And so, in essence, let's, for argument's sake, say that this engineering field of study with this in chemistry became 30 hours. Then most of the degrees in engineering right now are right at 128 hours, and so you would take off 30 hours. You'd have the 98 hours left. And really, probably better for me to answer the question globally of degrees are limited to 120, and you pull off 30, and you have 90 left. And so the statute doesn't really speak to exactly how you sequence that and make that work. But obviously, as John has discussed in several committees, they're going to have to go in and make it fit into courses. And then you kind of have to, course slots. And then paragraph C more or less says that. If you don't arrive with the entire field of study, then you have to take what you have and make it fit. And so, and of course, I think it's important to point out that the burden of fields of study is really on the universities. But then I think a point that we're trying to make as the coordinating board, then once we do enough of this work in enough disciplines, it's really incumbent upon the community colleges to teach the fields of study. Because if this is the transfer of pathways, then this is really and truly what we need to be trying to get students down the road of. But did I answer your question, Dan?
Yes. And so, again, John and I have talked about this, so I'm going to kind of speak a little bit for him, if you don't mind.
Please.
But I think this, man, you can always disagree, okay? But we don't want to put a severe burden or any kind of a burden on our four-year schools, and that's not what we're trying to do here. And so, from my perspective as a chemistry professor, okay, so I can speak to this very clearly, it doesn't bother me that we don't have Chem 1411 in the FOS. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. Why? Because 1412 is in there. And so if they don't have the chemistry for 1412, they're going to have to get it whether they're at UT or Del Mar or Prairie View or Kingsville, it doesn't matter. If your curriculum starts with Chem 1412, basically. And I'm just fine with that. I don't see that as being an issue whatsoever. And speaking to that, you'll notice over here in Prairie View A&M that they're also kind of in the same way. They don't have a specific Chem 1411 in there, but they do expect you to have the chemistry expertise getting out of that first year that anybody would expect to have. So, my proposal for that would be, just as we can talk about this, is that we don't include 1411 in the field of study, but we do include 1412.
Go ahead.
I have a question about that, because then, are we putting that burden of not having 1411, just because UT and Prairie View do not, on all of these other schools? I mean, the vast majority of them include 1411. So that's one of my questions is, do we put, are we saying we're going to follow Prairie View and UT Austin's curriculum?
Can I answer that?
Sure.
Okay. I think that's a point that came up in our field of study. If your school has Chem 1411 as a requirement, certainly Chem 1411 is going to be part of it. This is not saying that you can't accept the courses that are being transferred from another school. It's just talking about what's going to go into the degree plan for the receiving institution. And even at UT, if they do not test out of 1412, they are going to take 1411. At that point, it is not part of the degree plan. It's something they have to do to get ready for the degree plan. I mean, is that how you understand it too? And so there's not really a loss for whichever school's coming into. If they have 1411 as one of their requirements for chemical engineering, it's satisfied.
I think we need to ask ourselves how many students really come in and are able to test out of chemistry 1411. Is this just a way to get around 120 hours in the degree, when the reality is most students are going to have 124 hours because they don't place out? I don't feel good about that.
Well, let me speak to that, and I'll speak from the perspective of the University of Texas at Austin. When we looked at transcripts of students and we looked at what they were registering for as they entered into our degree plan, few, if any, students took and registered for Chemistry 301. Our equivalent would be the equivalent we would have for 1411. And we were trying to find ways of adding content further into the program, and the way we did that was, well, and we're more than 120 hours, we're 128, I believe. And the way we managed that was, well, let's cut Chemistry 301 out because they're already coming in with that. And so yes, I think the point is for us at the University of Texas at Austin, most, if not all students come in having credit for it or showing they have credit for it or an equivalency credit. And if they don't, then yes, then they do need to take Chemistry 301 and register for it, take it, get a grade, but it doesn't count against these 128 hours for the degree. It's not part of our degree plan. And so my position on this would be if we suggest that the field of study include 1412 because that goes across all of the four-year colleges and schools, and then the understanding would be, well, to take 1412, students must also take 1411 or show competency in 1411. And so it's sensible then that it's included as part of the field. I don't know if it's the field of study or the degree plan. There's some name for this at the community colleges where the body of work. And if it's included as a body of work at, let's say, Midland College, for students that are interested in chemical engineering or engineering, then you're going to accept that as their body of work. And when they transfer to a four-year school, it's the 1412 that's accepted into all the degree plans, and it creates no problem. The downside to this is that you're asking them to take you're not asking them, they're taking a course that is not going to receive credit at the receiving institution toward their degree plan as part of the field of study. However, it's my understanding that if someone were to transfer to Texas A&M and they took organic chemistry, inorganic 1411, if it's in their degree plan, it would be included in the courses they would take. And so I'm very long-winded in this. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to find those areas where the overlap is unambiguous. And if we get those into the field of study, let's look at what those work out to be for chemical engineering. And then there won't be this huge battle over we can't accept that. And who the we is the four-year schools. And so this is why I think I agree with Dan. If we say 1412 is in the chemical engineering field of study, that we recognize students have to have taken 1411 to take 1412. But 1411 is not just part of the engineering field of study.
At Del Mar, we have students test out of 1411. We also accept AP credit for 1411, and we have dual credit students who are taking currently our classes, and they test out of it. So we have a number of students who are looking to going into engineering or other fields that do not take 1411. And so we'd actually disadvantage them if we put it in a sense. I don't know, that's a hard one to answer.
And I have a question. I'll ask it of Matthew. Matthew, Kingsville requires inorganic 1 and 2 as part of its curriculum. Is that correct? If a student comes in and has declared ACGM equivalence with 1411 and 1412 for the courses, if a student comes in with both of those, you simply accept them for transfer.
Yes.
And then, John, okay, thank you.
And it is part of our degree plan. Both of them are part of the degree plan as Dan has indicated on the table.
Okay, thank you. Now, if a student comes into UT with 1411 and 1412, John, 1412 would apply as Chem 302. And how would you treat the students 1411, provided it were not part of a field of study?
They can transfer any number of courses, and they can show up on their transcript, but we are not counting them toward the degree. So they're part of the body of work that a student has done. It's just not part of the degree plan, when you count up, if they satisfied, can you put something in every one of these boxes that has to be filled? There's no box for Chemistry 301 that needs to be filled.
Yes, so the student has taken the course, has learned the body of knowledge from Organic 1, and has completed the Organic 2 requirement for UT. And it transfers perhaps as an elective or simply as credit.
We're talking about Inorganic 1, it just, they can transfer it in. It doesn't count for anything.
Okay.
It just shows up.
Okay, thank you.
Can I-
And the point
well,
I'm...
Let me just explain that, because
Well,
we
let
have
me
it all
just
the
say,
time.
the point I'm getting to is that the student has done the learning. The student stands possibly to lose 4 hours, and I think that's Margaret's concern. Now, if a student loses 4 hours is not a lot of course credit to lose. I think where it becomes a problem is that it reaches a critical mass if it's 4 in this area, and 4 in that area, and 3 in that area. So maybe the critical mass issue comes into play here at some point, and we can let possibly one course go but not another out of this tuning sequence. And that's just for your consideration. I certainly don't recommend that one way or another, but it is one way to think about it.
One of my concerns is what we see with students is this is very misleading. In our area of West Texas, we do not have any dual credit chemistry classes. We don't have any AP classes. So students are not going to come to a huge number. Remember, people do live west of 35. And these students simply, for the most part, do not have that opportunity. So they're going to come to us, and they're going to say, if they're coming to going to UT Austin, I'm not going to take 1411 because that is not in their degree plan. Well, it may not be in their degree plan, but our prerequisite for 1412 is 1411. It becomes for not only for the community college, but also for the four-year school, a very bad PR move. People simply don't like that. What they perceive is, and I think this could be correct, is it's simply, you have to have that knowledge, but we're not admitting that you may have to take 4 additional hours. We're muddling the degree plan. That's what I see.
And a correction in terminology or advice on terminology. When you're talking about degree plan, you're talking about a local plan toward a degree in AA. A field of study is not equivalent to a degree plan. So just to make that point.
So can I ask, especially I guess of John, since you're the representative here for one of the universities that doesn't require the 1411. So if we were to recommend a field of study that, let's say we recommend a field of study that looks exactly like what is in the second column, okay, what's there under the tuning work that was previously done. So that then requires any student that, if they complete a complete field of study at a community college and transfer to UT, then that requires UT to accept all of those courses. Okay, but that does not require you at UT to show 1411 or to change your degree plan to show 1411. I'm thinking it doesn't. I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, so I'm going to answer this, and then Gary's going to not correct me, he's going to help us understand it if I misstate this. If we list 1411 in the field of study and University of Texas and Prairie View A&M, for example, I think, well, University of Texas doesn't have a course. It's not a required course. You have to show competency in it. Then those 3 hours that transfer, that student brings with them have to be counted toward the degree somehow. It's not that the course, we would have to go somewhere in our curriculum and say, those 3 hours are going to substitute for something. And so you have to accept the hours, not just the course. And then you go down the list and you draw a line through some course and say, this is in place of that course. And we have to decide what that course is at the receiving institution. So I think this is my understanding.
And yes, and perhaps to build upon that is, like, if their degree had a lower level elective in it, but I think we probably should point out that, to the best of my knowledge, lower level electives are extinct at public institutions in the state of Texas. I mean, there might be a few and a few degrees, but they're scarce. And so if they had a lower level elective, then they could displace that. But, of course, I started that with if. And yeah, John is correct. They have to count the hours. And then if you go back and look at C, to where it says if a student doesn't, by statute in 61.823, if you go back and look at paragraph C, to another without completing the entire shall receive academic credit for each of the courses. And so, as John says, yes, they've got to find some way to address it. But then I will also share that we've had internal conversations here, not specifically about this course, but about, hidden prerequisites, if you will, which, Margaret, I think that's your conversation, in that, what is it really and truly taking the majority of students to get to? And so, as I said, if this was easy, we would do it, but it's a complex topic.
I wanted to ask a question, and maybe this is directed toward Dan and Margaret. There was some sense from the earlier the combined engineering field of study that, and I think you call it the associate's degree or some degree that they're going to get, and they need a certain number of hours associated with that. And what we would hope coming out of this is that, to the extent possible, those hours that are in this associate's degree map into this field of study. And then I think this is the objective, that this is where you're headed with this. And so I understand the desire to do that. And then there was also a stated desire that, well, we need to be, if we're just looking at math and physics and chemistry, then where's the engineering content in this associate's degree that transfers in broadly to all of the schools? And where we ended up only with math and physics, because we couldn't find something that worked across all the disciplines. And I think the point of, if you take a total of, and I think we're talking about, I don't know how many hours these courses are. I'm assuming they're 4-hour courses. So we're looking at 16 hours, and I would probably advocate that when I look at, and I'll go down the list to the next course, which is the organic chemistry. Organic chemistry is a course that shows up. The organic chemistry 1 is in all of the curricula of the 4-year schools, but organic chemistry 2 apparently is not.
Can I speak to that then?
It's Texas Tech, right?
If you're going to raise it right now, then I
Go
need
ahead.
to talk about that. Okay, but let me make one comment first. Nothing has changed with the tuning compact. So your articulation agreement you have right now with Texas Tech is totally valid. Nothing has changed on that. And I think my understanding is the tuning study is not going to, the field of study is not going to replace the tuning study. So those are individual articulation agreements between the receiving and transferring institution. Now, okay, jumping ahead to Organic 2, Texas Tech has a very interesting situation here. What they do is they require 2 chemistry electives. You said it doesn't happen very often anymore, but it happens here. And so from my perspective, the only chemistry elective that someone can have going from a community college to Texas Tech is Organic 2, which the majority of those folks take anyway. It still leaves an elective in polymer chemistry or analytical chemistry or whatnot. So I would say, and I'm going to argue that we accept the Organic 2 across the board because we're not disadvantaging Texas Tech at all by doing that. Okay, but that's a discussion we can have when it comes to that.
Thank you, Dan. So my point, Margaret, I wanted to make was that the associate's degree has 16 hours of, let's say, chemistry, first and second year chemistry in it. And at least within the University of Texas at Austin, we have 12 of those 16. And if you look across, I think Prairie View A&M, I can't tell from this table, but I guess it's in theirs as well.
Yes.
So I'm going to take a very parochial view. We will, I guess we'll fight tooth and nail not to include 1411, but we can clearly swallow the other three we already accept them. So what I'm trying to find is I'm channeling my middle child, in the family, a big family, and can we find a common ground? And so 1411, not including 1411, gets us there. But we have the other three.
Can I speak a little bit more to that? Okay, this actually came up very clearly in the big committee. And the point made there was there's a huge burden on academic advising for all this stuff because you can really get messed up. And I think that was one of the statements at the bottom that we made actually on that original field of study was that it's incumbent upon the student and the institution to provide competent and timely and ongoing advising to the community college student. And that's actually where that's going to get picked up at. If they want to go to UT and they come into Midland and they're already competent in 1411, I'm assuming that the chemistry faculty there has a test out procedure. Maybe they haven't had to use it, but most every school does. For instance, for Del Mar, we give them like 4-hour test to make sure they can do all the same materials that a 1411 student would come out doing. So I don't know. It just seems to me, again, speaking as a faculty member, when someone comes in and says they want to go to UT, if they can test out of 1411, fine. If they don't want to, which most of them wouldn't, because the thing about it is, it's coming to Del Mar or to Midland. I think the whole sequence is kind of helpful for your, but it's just helpful. It's not necessary.
And Dan, if I can, yes, advising is very important. I think that's one of the things that the host state of Texas could do more of, and it's easy for me to say in the chair I sat in. But and you talked about advising, you talked about articulation agreements. Well, we're trying. The purpose of fields of study is trying to help students at the state level, and I agree it's challenging, John. But UT, or from a college point of view, you literally have to have hundreds, if not thousands, of articulation agreements if you're really and truly going to have pathways for your students. Because even though students start out and think they're going to go to UT or A&M or whatever, many of them might wind up at UTEP or UTA or Tarleton State or anywhere else. And so that's why the field of studies are so important, is because, yes, as I said, we know it's a burden on the universities of trying to take those individual kind of things out of play. And yeah, it's hard to get one pair of shoes that fits all. And John, I guess maybe for what it's worth, I'm also a middle child, and so maybe that's why I got assigned this task or something. but it's really trying to move. It's trying to be a game changer in the transfer pathway. But anyway, with that said.
And one last point here. If the student is taking these courses at the community college, then they're not going to be able to take 1412 unless they have the prerequisite or they can test out of it. So it's kind of like a moot point. Before they transfer the field of study material, they can't transfer the organic chemistry unless they've had Chem 1412. It is a prerequisite. And so I think that it's actually, again, I think it's just kind of an advising burden on us at the community college level to make sure we go ahead and sequence these things correctly.
In 25 years, we've never had a student to test out a 1411. So, from that standpoint, I think this is, again, I think my concern is that we're misleading students in that this is a hidden requirement in the degree. So that's, that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I'm sensitive to that, and this is sort of like the nuclear option, but I guess, the receiving institutions can always say, well, but then if we accept this student, we're going to have to eat all these hours, and we're just not going to accept this student. That's right. And so that's always, it is a consequence of some of the decisions that we make today. And I know this is going to come up because there's other courses farther down there where this is definitely the case. This is, the University of Texas at Austin, I think, is the only one that doesn't have, that I know we expect competency in this, but we don't count it in the degree plan.
I guess we also have to ask ourselves if all these other schools have worked it into the degree plan, what's different about UT Austin?
I'd rather not answer that.
I mean, speaking from my experience, my limited experience at Kingsville, we also struggle with what you were mentioning, John, in terms of wanting to be sure certain courses that we want to include in the degree plan in the upper levels are there, and so we're looking at room. We have a degree plan that has 129 hours, and all of the chemical engineering, there are no elective chemical engineering courses. Everything is a required course, and we're still looking at managing what do we want to, issues about cutting out a computer science requirement so that we can accommodate and put in PChem 2 and a couple of other things like that. We're considering looking at making the conservation principles course a 2-sequence course rather than just a single course, and it's all about the management of those hours. So I can definitely see both sides of the story.
And one last comment to that. Our chemistry degree plan at Del Mar College requires calculus. And so it's there, but in order to take the calculus, the students have to either show competency in the college algebra and trigonometry, which case they can start with calculus, or they've got to take those 2 courses, which are core courses, but they're not counting towards the degree plan. So we actually have those hidden, prerequisites already in our institutions.
Well, I don't, I guess what I would like to do before we come back and take motions on, what should we do with the chemistry, why don't we continue discussing the courses and just sort of get all the issues out on the table. And then we can come back and be specific about a given course. So I guess the next courses to look at, we've talked about inorganic chemistry. There's organic chemistry 1, which again is the ACGM 2423, and organic chemistry 2, which is ACGM 2425. And taking the lead from what Dan said, it appears that these courses transfer in our part of the degree plans at every institution except Texas Tech, but that Texas Tech has an elective course, a chemistry elective course slot could be used for organic chemistry too. So for my, as I look at this, it seems that there's less conflict around the organic chemistry 1 and organic chemistry 2.
I do want to point one thing out, and I'm trying to remember which one of these schools it was. One of these schools requires the organic course, but not the lab. Okay, so I think that's getting back into this question again. That's where, and I talked with my chemistry faculty, what would you think about somebody taking the organic chemistry class, not the lab, and transferring into chemical engineering? Well, they didn't think it was a fantastic idea, but they didn't think it was a game changer either. One of these schools, I just can't remember which one it is. It might even be, you think it's UH? Okay, there you go, okay. So they don't require the lab. And the principle I was going to hope that we could apply would be the same one we did on the math, okay? I think that transferring 4 hours of Organic 1 from Del Mar to 3 hours of Organic 1 at University of Houston, in our faculty perspective, is fine, okay? I don't know how it's perspective for the state of Texas, however.
I think with the acceptance of the idea that 12 hours of calculus from community college could transfer and be applied as 8 at the university, we've established the principle that credit for the courses can apply with a downward count of semester credit hours.
That's great, thank you. With that, I frankly am in total agreement with John that I think these Organic 1 and Organic 2 are pretty much straight across the board.
Okay, any more discussion on organic?
I guess I just have one. So we're going to cram Organic 2 down Tech's throat, but not cram 1411 down UT's throat. Is that what I mean, that bothers me.
I don't think that's the way I would interpret this. I wouldn't, because there is an elective course, they have to take 2 chemistry elective. Dan's analysis holds up.
What they said, they have to take 2 chemistry electives, period.
They have to take 2 chemistry electives, and it could be organic chemistry 2, or it could be other courses. And so if this counts as one of the chemistry electives, then a student would say, well, that's the course I want to count as one of my electives. And so there's no cramming associated with this. It is the course that student who's done this work at a 2-year college will apply toward their degree at Texas Tech. So it's not nothing's being forced in that particular regard.
And if they don't want to take Organic 2, they don't have to. They can transfer to Tech with the field of study body intact minus Organic 2, and Texas Tech will be required to take all those courses. They won't have Organic 2, which means they're open for 2 electives in chemistry. So there is absolutely no impact on Texas Tech.
I didn't follow that.
Can I try it again then?
Yeah, please.
Okay, Texas Tech requires 2 chemistry electives. And if a student at Del Mar decides he's going to go to Texas Tech, does not take Organic 2 as part of the field of study for chemical engineering, they're going to go there and they're not going to get counted for Organic 2, which means they're going to have to do 2 chemistry electives at Texas Tech. So there's no loss to Texas Tech in that sense.
So you're saying that a student intending to transfer to Texas Tech could opt not to take Organic 2 and still transfer what she had completed in the field of study?
Right.
Yes.
But then they'd still be required to take 2 additional chemistry courses.
Well, yes, and a bit of concern is that we could do one-off examples until the cows come home and make them work. And Dan, quite honestly, we could almost do the same kind of conversation of, well, the student wanted to go to Texas Tech, but then she decided that Lubbock was way out there or whatever and wanted to be in Austin. And then you concerned about playing the nuances of the ifs in this. And so, you know, we can't consider every permutation of every possible impact of every unique student. And I guess my point is, if we're not careful, we're almost kind of saying, well, we're going to take the fields of study, but then we're going to revert them down to articulation agreements. And I think John's concern, if I'm not trying to speak for John, but is, as statute says, here it is, you have got it. And so that's kind of my reservation, I guess, is perhaps the best way to express it.
Let me make a comment about the situation between Texas Tech and organic chemistry and UT Austin in inorganic chemistry 1. With respect to organic chemistry 2 at Texas Tech, if they were looking at a student and they would go, they're going to use this as an elective. So this is meeting the degree requirements that we are imposing on our students to get a degree from Texas Tech. We accept this, right? If they say this ACGM is equivalent to an organic chemistry course that they would offer, or this is an elective course, satisfies it, then that's done. If, on the other hand, so there's no receiving bucket at the University of Texas for inorganic chemistry 1. There is a bucket that you can put this in at Texas Tech, and that's how I'm looking at this. Now, I don't think we're, being very specific. If you said that the field of study included, I'll say some number of our chemistry courses, and the students transferred those in, if they transfer those into any institution, any four-year institution, they're going to apply. And it seems to me that organic chemistry 2 is one of those courses that can be used to satisfy degree requirements at the receiving institution. And so I see it in that light, even though it comes in as an elective course.
I guess my question is, this is 2 electives, so is this 6 hours? Is this 8 hours? Is this 2 hours? We don't know.
I don't remember. It just said 2 chemistry electives. It did have an hour requirement, but I don't remember what it was.
Okay.
Any more discussions on chemistry? Okay, then the next block of courses on this table are the Physics 1 and Physics 2. And I would argue that these made it to the full vote of the entire engineering field of study. So it would be my counsel that we just move on to the mathematics, but let me ask if there's any discussion of the physics, because it was settled. It seemed to have been settled by the entire engineering field of study group. Go ahead.
Other than the fact that we do have the same thing going on with physics lab. But I think we've already discussed that with organics. I think we're fine, as long as we understand it does transfer in downwards to ours.
Well, let's yes, I mean, it's kind of standard of practice that the community colleges do 4-hour science courses and the universities do 3-hour science courses. And so, I'm not here to make a definitive statement today, but that is a standard of practice. I obviously would take it to Rex and say, I think we know that this is how this operates around the state already, and then I think he would take it forward. But I just want to hedge the bet that we need to understand that we're working for our board. And
So are there any questions on physics? Matt or Margaret? No. Okay, thank you. So then we move on to math, and this created quite a bit of discussion, I should say. And we settled on, and it's not clear to me what we settled on, because I keep looking for this. So we agreed in the engineering field of study, the whole thing, that was Math 2413 was the one course. Is that true, or were there more than that?
No, the engineering field of study, as proposed by the main committee, includes Calc 1, 2, and 3, 24, 13, 14, and 15.
Okay. All right, thank you. So and then how that transfers into the individual schools, whether those 12 stay as 12, or those 12 are received as 8, is part of this, what Gary's talking about. And so the other remaining course that's on this list is the differential equations course. And we did not, well, I argued for not including this, and I know A&M argued Terry Reed was arguing for A&M in College Station that the differential equations not be included in this list. And let me speak for the University of Texas at Austin on this particular regard. And and maybe you know, Matt, some of the issues associated with A&M and College Station, but the content of the differential equations courses have evolved. They're under evaluation. I know at University of Texas at Austin campus, we've reconfigured this course completely, and it's actually, we're doing away with the number that's listed here as the UT equivalent, because we're changing the content of some of the upper level math courses to better reflect what we feel our students need. And for that reason, we're not even listing 427K in our catalogs, and after 2016-18. The 18-20 catalog's not even going to list it. So if we look forward, and you couldn't tell us unless you were sitting in the rooms with all these discussions, the differential equations class, as it's currently articulated in 2420, doesn't provide what we feel students need to be successful in the upper division engineering courses. And that's why I was not voting in favor of that. And I think that was the position, I could be wrong, but I think that was the position that Terry was taking for College Station.
Can I talk about that? Okay, my recollections of the discussion was some of the engineering fields do not require differential equations, so it just kind of automatically kind of fell off the table. The question here was, what I think you're addressing right now is, does chemical engineering require differential equations? And if chemical engineering requires differential equations, then could it potentially be included in the tuning study? And you're making an argument that UT is getting ready to change the requirement on it. And I think everything else other than that, other than UT, has that requirement, doesn't it? I'm looking at this now. No, UH doesn't. So to me, it's kind of one of those things where if the receiving institution wants differential equations and someone comes in with it, they're going to accept it just because it's something at their institution.
I would like to see it included in the agreement, differential equations included. When you look across here, it appears to me that the vast majority of schools require it, if I'm reading this correctly.
Well, UT doesn't require it, University of Houston doesn't require it, and the other ones look like they do.
A&M, Lamar, A&M Kingsville, Prairie View, and Texas Tech. So I would like to see us leave it.
Yeah, I can't speak. I don't know anything about any changes happening on our campus with respect to that particular course, either within the whole College of Engineering or with just within our discipline. I'm not aware of any changes, but I've only been there a short time, so I can't speak that well.
Yeah. One of the things we really have to be careful about is we don't cause some of that collateral damage, Margaret, that if we put something in that's so strict and so inclusive of everything, then you can automatically guarantee that nobody's going to transfer to University of Texas or Texas A&M, because they're not going to accept students that have those courses, because it's not going to fit in their degree plan. We need to have something which is going to be something where hopefully we can build some sort of consensus of the courses so all schools can take it.
I agree with you 100%, but I think in doing that, we need to look at all the schools. I don't think we can just pattern this after one school or two schools. We need to look at the consensus.
Margaret, I'm sympathetic to your perspective on this, and I appreciate that point of view, and I would just, I think we should be careful in, there's two parts to this. One is where, I don't know where many of the students transfer to, and so maybe we're going to build a system and no one transfers to UT Austin. So what are we arguing about? I know that's not the case. The other part to this is that if the students do transfer into, let's say, University of Houston, they might have they have a different math requirement. Maybe it's linear math, maybe it's discrete math. I don't know what their additional math requirement is. And so the students are not going to be, as far as the faculty at the University of Houston, I'm going to use their example since there's nothing in this box. They've made the decision, or they've looked at the curriculum and they've decided that these are the math skills that students must have to be successful in upper division courses. And so those students coming in, yeah, they've had this course in differential equations, but they're going to be missing that competency. So in the past, they would transfer the courses, but now something has to be substituted. It has to be in lieu of some other course that the faculty at the University of Houston feel is important. And I would argue the same, maybe the argument that I would make, and this is a position that some of my colleagues who are serving on the field of study, is that maybe what this causes us to do is to ask, well, what is the content of 2420, and is it aligned with what these courses are that these other universities have in their curriculum? And so this is a matter of reevaluating the content of AGCM 2420, but
Can I speak to that?
yeah, you can.
Okay. This is a place where I was going to maybe advise that we actually ask through our subcommittee that the schools get together and look at this course and see what they need. Because none of these are, if you look at this, none of these are accepting this as a ACGM equivalent. Okay, which means there's something potentially missing in our ACGM. So this would be a good place for us to come back and look.
Let me
Can make recommendations to the main committee that it itself make the recommendation that a particular course be reviewed through the ACGM process.
One of the issues, if you'll look at this, is that these courses are junior level. So the reason that you don't see an ACGM equivalent is because they're junior level. So in my experience, our 2420 transfers and takes the place of that junior level class. That's my experience, but that's why I think there is no ACGM equivalent here, is because these are junior level classes. And the ACGM, of course, only goes up through sophomore.
The tuning study considered this to be a sophomore level course when they proposed it. Okay, and that was just, I don't know, 6 years ago when that happened? Yeah.
You know, I have to be mindful at the community college, if this is going to be a field of study, then we have to have enough hours in this to have the associate degree. And so I think we are not being very mindful of students, because when we first started talking, we talked about how this is an inverted degree so that in a student's senior year, they might be taking things like history, government, so forth. Well, if you gut all of these courses, then they're not going to have enough hours at the community college in the field of study. They're going to have to come in with what we've been doing, which is history, government, so forth, to get the hours. I mean, that's another concern, is that we're really, I see some damage coming here to community colleges.
I have a question to the structure of the two-year degree. What is the hour requirement? Is some number like 60? And if you said you were going to be in engineering, you can put an adjective in front of engineering, then then how many of those hours are technical?
None of them would be technical. I think, are you talking an engineering course, an ENGR is not a technical course?
No, I guess what I'm asking is, if I get a two-year degree from Midland College, all I need is 60 hours, or I have to have 60 hours that smell a certain way and look a certain way?
You have to have 60 hours that look and smell a certain way.
And I'm asking you to articulate that breakdown of which of these are technical, like the courses that we're looking at. How many of them must be technical courses of the 60 hours?
I think you and I are on different terminology paths.
And let me take a stab at this. I believe he's using technical to mean academic specific, like E&GR type courses. So we know, obviously, we have the 42-hour core, which the university also has the 42-hour core. And then so I don't know exactly how you count it at UT. I assume you count the 42-hour core as the core. You probably talk about the ancillary courses that come from the other colleges that are not engineering, and then you probably talk about the engineering courses being your technical component of the degree.
No,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Right.
See, the problem is that a student at a four-year school has 4 years to get everything packed in. And if they can take a course in their senior year, that's fine, right? They just have to get it all done, but within 4 years, if they follow the curriculum, or the four-year plan. At a community college, they have to do something within 2 years. And I'm trying to ask what that something is. When I'm looking at a student's transcript, they go, okay, they've checked all these boxes off, but I don't think these are the core, or this is something else. I know it's there, but I don't normally think that way. I'm going, so a first-year student typically takes math and physics and chemistry and an English class or a communications class or something, this class or that class. And so when it's done at the end of 2 years, how many of those courses would be what I would put into the buckets of mathematics, chemistry, and physics? That's what I'm asking.
In my experience, we are transferring 66 to 72 hours to most schools for engineering. So included in that would be the core, your typical English, history, government. So I can only speak for what Midland College is doing. But so a student in an ideal world, their core math would be Calc 1. Then for an Associate of Science degree, we have some requirements for that, as far as almost, you have to have X number of hours outside the core that are in science or math. So what they would take at Midland College then would be, in the math realm, they would have Calc 1, which is in the core, Calc 2, Calc 3, and DE. The science that's in the core would be University Physics 1 and 2. Outside the core, they would usually take chemistry. Now we don't have very many students we have a few, but we don't have very many who transfer on in chemical engineering. But if we did, they would take chemistry 1411, 1412, and the 2 organics. In addition then to the science and the math they've gotten, they would take intro to engineering and statics and dynamics if those apply.
Oops, wrong way, okay. Yeah, obviously the community colleges have a tendency to be somewhat different amongst themselves. We all have a 42-hour core, but based on the previous field of study, and again, not trying to put an undue burden on the students when they transfer, we do not transfer, at Del Mar anyway, in our Associates of Sciences and Engineering, we do not transfer 42 hours of core courses. Okay, so we actually have the capability there when they go forward to be able to spread them out over the 4 years.
Right.
Otherwise, it's horrible to take nothing but math and science courses for 2 years. I mean, that's just hard. It's good to have some liberal artsy in there too to keep your soul going. So, but I mean, we have different core courses. For instance, for us, chemistry 1411 is a core course.
Right.
And so is physics 1, but not physics 2. So it's a little variability amongst the community colleges too.
And does that answer your question, John? Did you get to?
Not really, but where I was trying to get to with this was, if students took all of these that are on this, in this column here, is that what, does that get them their associate's degree in science or engineering or something? And,
No.
and does it allow them to do enough of the other non-technical courses? Or, so what is the objective? Because there was this requirement, or there was this expectation that, well, we want to teach engineering courses and we want to include these, we want to be able to offer these, so we have to have these as part of the field of study. And so this was part of the tension. And so I'm wondering is, if, for example, differential equations wasn't on the list, does this disadvantage, not someone transferring, does this disadvantage a student in a 2-year program that they're not going to be able to get their 2-year degree? That's what I'm wondering.
Let me take a stab at it, John. And from a community college point of view, from either an AA Associates of Arts or an AS Associate of Science, there's 60 hours, and there's really and truly 2 buckets that they need to concentrate on. One is the 42-hour core, and then 2 is the other 18 hours to round out the degree. The core is the same for all public institutions across the state as far as the component areas. And so you have like 6 hours of communication, 3 hours of math, 6 hours of science, and so forth. And then you have the component area option, which is 6 hours. So I think to help you, John, is let's go ahead and take the university physics, which at the community colleges is 8 hours. So from a community college point of view, since I'm starting this, I would count those as my core science courses. And so that got me 6 hours into my 42. Then they have the option of taking those 2 lab hours, and it either counts as part of the component area option. So the 42, I'm breaking off a 6, and either they count those 2 there, or they count those 2 out of the 18. Okay, so now I've got science taken care of from a 42-hour core point of view, right? But then, as the conversation currently sets, or at least from your point of view, John, maybe if you pulled in these 12 chemistries, then those 12 chemistries, because you've already filled up the science bucket in the core, would move up to the 18. Then you go look at math, and Margaret, this was your point, is there's a 3-hour core math requirement, and so Calc 1 would go there, then the other 8 would move up into the 18. And so in those 2 examples, I've consumed the 18, right? And those 2 numbers are 20. And so now there's a rule, and it's Administrative Code 9.183. Dan, this is what you spoke to. of that the students don't have to graduate from the community college core complete because of these other courses that start pushing this down. And so then if that's at 20, the 42-hour core just now got parsed down a couple of hours, because if we're going to stop at 60, right? And so then I think, to your point, if you go in and you start pulling in some of these other engineering courses, you're pushing that 40-hour core hour down more. And then, as you know, the engineering degree is inverted. And so perhaps in their junior year or whatever, they're either taking a humanities course or an English course or whatever it is to make this work out. And so if all of, and I haven't totaled all of these, but if all of these equaled some number, let's just make a number 45, then, as I said, we'd count one of the math courses, we'd count 2 of the science courses, and I think that's it, y'all, from a core point of view, right? And so then we satisfied 9 core hours, and my made-up number of 35, then 36 is the non-core hours. And so when they transferred to you, they would still need 42 minus 9, 33 hours of core, but then they would have 60 hours, because y'all would round out with Englishes and histories and governments or whatever to get to the 60. And that's simple as mud, right? Does that help?
Actually, it does, although I didn't follow it all. It helps in the following respects, is that I think what I'm trying to get to is what is the objective of the 2-year school? So I will answer that. I asked this sort of rhetorically, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong. But one of the objectives is students come in and they want to get an associate's degree in science or something, and so they're going to take the 60 hours. They're going to take an appropriate 60 hours, and it gets them that degree. Other students, and you want to be able to do that, and so there's a variety of ways of getting to that, and we just heard of many permutations that get someone to that. Maybe someone comes in and this is all they're interested in, but then once they enroll in the program at a 2-year school, they go, no, I want to go to a 4-year school, or maybe that was their objective all along. And if I want to go to a 4-year school, maybe I want to major in chemical engineering. So how should I structure my 60 hours so that I can best be prepared to transfer and it counts directly toward my degree? But while I'm here at this community college, I'm going to finish this 60 hours. So I'm going to do something that gets me to this 60 limit that allows me to get an associate's degree so I finish it here before I move on. And so this is another group of students. And then there are others who come in and they never intended to get the associate's degree. They were just starting, because it's for whatever reason, this is where they're starting, and they always intended to transfer. And so they want to take as many courses as they can that count exactly for their, that will directly apply toward their degree at a 4-year school where they land. And so there's like 3 groups of students, I think, if I get this summarized right. And so who are we trying to help here?
Well, I think we're trying to help. I see those students you were discussing as being perhaps more homogeneous than you do. And I can, again, only speak from the perspective of Midland College. Most engineering students, when they come to us, I just see 2 groups. I see those who from day one say they want to be an engineering major. Now that's about as far as most entering freshmen can go. They know little about the various fields of engineering, which I think is one good thing about the Intro to Engineering class, because it helps them to understand the different careers. But I see that's the vast majority of our students. We have a second group that's a smaller group. They start out actually in a technical field, which would be something like energy technology or sometimes you might be surprised, but automotive or diesel mechanics, and they do very well there. These tend to be first-generation students. These tend to be those whose parents probably, in many instances, did not finish high school, but they're very bright. They get their feet wet, they get some confidence, and suddenly they're switching to engineering. So at Midland College, we want all students to get to earn an associate degree. We have not really used a field of study in engineering. We're almost too small for that. Like four-year schools who have to have, average of 5 graduates in a field every year, we fall under that also. And so at Midland College, we really, in the academic area, we only have 2 degrees. We have an Associate of Science and we have an Associate of Arts. The other thing students want to do is to take as many of these classes as possible before they move on, because these classes are at our cost, which is about 1/3 of the cost at a four-year school. So for the vast majority of our students in engineering, they're moving on with 70 or more hours. Or in the case of A&M and UT Austin, you'd be amazed at how many students you send back to us in the summertime, and what are they taking? They're taking the 2 physics classes, they're taking these upper-level math classes. Sometimes they're taking some of the chemistry classes. So are you all transferring more than 60 hours? Absolutely, you are. But it's a cost thing, and that's important.
Okay, so can we have a motion for lunch?
Let's do it.
And then, what, 12:30? What do you, earlier than that?
It's up to you, but typically, these subcommittees have been taking about 30 minutes.
Okay.
12:15.
How about 12:15 on the official wall clock? So we'll adjourn for lunch. It's a little over a half hour from now.
And we're still
And we're on topic 5. Okay, we're going to call the meeting back to order. It's 12:15 on February 18th. This is the Chemical Engineering Field of Study Subcommittee. And for the Engineering Field of Study. And we are on Agenda Topic 5, Discussion of Engineering, Maths, and Science and Core Courses to be recommended for the Engineering Field of Study track. And this morning, before the lunch break, we went down the list of courses that are organized. We talked about chemistry and physics and the math courses. And I'd like to move our discussion to the block of courses on this table that refer to engineering, that are referred to as engineering. And before I do, I want to find out if there were any unfinished comments from the mathematics, because we sort of broke for lunch without saying, are we done? Okay, so not hearing any comments, let's move to engineering. And so the courses that we're talking about are Intro to Engineering. This is ACGM 1201, Engineering Programming, ACGM 2304, Electrical Circuits, ACGM 2305/2105, Statics and Dynamics, ACGM 2303 or 2403, Introduction to Chemical Engineering, which is ACGM 2333, and Thermodynamics 1, which is ACGM 2334. So,
Let me give a little bit of background.
go ahead, Dan.
Okay, when I was compiling this list, I just want you to understand that you see these things sitting in here, but there's hardly any similarity between them. Some of them are offered in general in the engineering. Some of them are specifically in the field itself. There's a number of them where the 2301s or the 1201s are offered in the chemical engineering program itself, and it's more specific. So I know that 1201 has been a bone of contention in our regular field of study, and our regular field of study had made a recommendation, if I remember right, to try to table a statewide group that would look at this and see if there's some way we could get everybody to agree on common content.
That is correct, Dan, and the Civil Engineering Subcommittee made a similar recommendation with some specific suggestions for content that might be considered.
Okay, so again, I guess my concern here, now, I must go back and confess, I'm speaking more as a practicing engineer than I am as anything else, because one of the things I do know as somebody who's hired chemical engineers, I've hired chemical engineers from UT, from Texas A&M, from Texas Tech, from Kingsville, maybe other schools, but I don't happen to remember, and they were all fine chemical engineers. So I think that we as a state are doing a pretty good job as far as that goes. I personally, without having the wisdom of Solomon, I do not know how to address this 1201, so I'll let someone else try to.
So at Kingsville, I know that particular course is what we refer to as a university course, a UNIV 12, I think we call it 12, I don't remember the number right now. But it is actually integrated, an introduction to engineering is integrated with a university success course for freshmen. Okay, and it's actually a series of 2 one-hour courses. Preferably taken in the freshman year. And so that is part university success and part introduction to engineering.
Is it part of your degree plan?
Yes, it is part of the degree plan, but it is not in the chemical engineering department, but the course is co-taught by one of the engineering professors and then co-taught by a university success type instructor. And we require it of all students, but we do not require it of non-traditional students, i.e. A student that has had military service or a student that is older than 25 years old. And we also do not require it of students transferring from a community college with with greater than so many hours. And I'm sorry, I don't remember that number. I've done a lot of advising, I've seen it, but I don't remember what that number is. It's probably like 40-plus hours, somewhere in that range. So, and I do know, though, that I think Del Mar, I'm not positive, but I think some of the community colleges, I will see students transfer in with an exact equivalent type of course, or at least it's a university success course.
Well, for Del Mar, it's the same thing. It's a University Success course. We recommend it for people who are interested in engineering so they can survey the field, but it's not required in our, at least in the chemical engineering area, it's not required.
Midland College teaches this course. I see it as a really good course for students who they think they want to be an engineer, but they really don't know what that entails. We do it like, we have a project, several projects in our course, so students are learning some engineering concepts and so forth, but we also have a variety of speakers who come in and talk about the different fields of engineering. From the community college perspective, I see this course as a good way to encourage students to go into engineering. I would see, in fact, we're working hard right now to offer this as a dual credit class, and our teacher would teach the lecture probably online and then go out and do some of the lab that's required with this.
Describe your experience.
Well, all right, so our introduction to engineering at the present time is a course that students don't have to take for the degree. It's offered in the first semester. It's a non-credit course. Credit, no credit, and so I mean, I appreciate the importance of having an introduction to engineering course of some kind, and I'm going to speak broadly across the other disciplines in engineering at UT. Some have a lot of technical content, and they get down to the meat of what is in, let's say, mechanical engineering or electrical and computer engineering, and ours is really just a sort of a broad brush overview, and here's where sort of survival skills in engineering. It doesn't really have a lot of technical. It has very little technical content associated with it. So I think, and I don't know what's, and you can see that the courses at the other institutions really don't map into this AGCM number, and I think the problem is that the content is so specific to a given institution because of how they interface with all of the school or their college, the departments at the first and second year, and whether this is done centrally or it's done distributed out into the departments. So I'm not challenging the value of this, and I can see the importance that this has in someone introducing someone to this concept at a two-year school or any school, but I'm just offering that we will have trouble swallowing this on our end. So
Midland College and Odessa College worked with Texas Tech, and so our curriculum is what they suggested. So it transfers readily.
Well, listening to that discussion, you can hear just a microcosm of the issues we had at the overall field of study. So I think that's why it was kind of, I think in our global field of study, I think that was kind of a punt. Kick the football down the road a little bit. But I don't know. To me, there's just a lot of questions here. Do we want it to be specific for the field? Do we want it to be for all of engineering? It's just hard for me right now to say we'd put something like that in the field of study when we even though on our ACGM perspective, we know exactly what we're supposed to be teaching. We have that listed out for us. We don't have any choices on that. where the universities do obviously have plenty of choices on that. So again, from my perspective, again, as a practicing engineer, when I went to engineering, you know, I kind of looked to myself to see what the different fields were, and I chose chemical engineering, you know, because first of all, I already had a master's in chemistry. That helps. Whatever.
Okay, I think another course that deserves, well, they all deserve discussion, but engineering programming is another one. And there are a few that have well, Kingsville, Texas A&M Kingsville has the ACGM, I guess it's a 3-hour versus a 4-hour, in terms of the number of credits, I don't know what the difference between 03 and 04 is.
It's a 3-hour course for us.
Okay, it's the second one is the
All
credit
right.
hours.
So, let me tell you where I see there are problems with this, and that's, and again, I'll be very parochial, speaking from the perspective of my institution, and we're in the throes of deciding what the content of this course, and then there's really two courses. There's two courses on this list, but we have a computing course, it's a numerical methods course. We have a course that's listed here, programming, and then we have an introduction to chemical engineering. And we're asking ourselves, what is the level of programming that makes the most sense to teach in an introductory course, which is, for us on this list would be 210, and then follow that up with applications that reinforce those skills. And when do you teach programming? And the programming moves forward into the proposal that we're evaluating would be to have programming go on in a junior level course where they learn structured programming, and it would be around MATLAB as the basis for that. But in this introduction to programming, what you have listed here, what we have listed here is our 210, the focus would be on Excel and Excel solvers. And because those are the tools that they're going to use in the next round of classes. And then that gets reinforced through projects and problems in that class. So it moves away completely from an engineering programming class. And honestly, I don't know what the content of 2304 is, but is it structured programming? Is it C+ programming? I don't know the answer to that. And so, and I think if you go to these other institutions, the problem is going to be what are those faculty using from this introduction to programming course that gets reinforced and sort of propagates forward as a tool that's used in subsequent courses? Or is it just a course where you should learn how to do structured programming and you should just learn how to do structured programming?
So at Kingsville, I cannot speak very well to what is in that 2303 or 2304, other than I do know right before I arrived on campus, decisions were being made that we're moving to a degree plan that is eliminating that as a requirement. If I remember correctly, I think we're eliminating that and putting back in PChem 2. We do have a numerical methods course that's a junior level course. But what mechanisms or what programming they're using in that, I'm not very aware of that. I'm not anywhere close to teaching that or knowing exactly what is being taught there. So I don't have any good information to add to that, other than I know at Kingsville we're going to be taking that course out of our specific degree plan. That's our current plan right now. And one thought of that was, it's again coming back to the issue of all the things that you want to get in there to get into the degree plan, and looking at, I believe part of our decision to our approach to making the decision to taking out that particular course in our program was partially evolved around the fact that ABET is not requiring programming knowledge now. So,
And speaking to the course specifically, it does talk about Excel solvers. At least what we do is we also do a mat lab. So it's actually really pretty technical. And does it go forward? Yes, it does. But I was personally hoping that this is one of the ones we'd be able to come to a consensus on. But, okay.
Well, I'm sorry. I'll turn my microphone on. It could be that what's required is an understanding of what these other universities teach in that course, or what do they want? And so the Excel solver, Excel overlaps. So they would, but then there was material from a chemical engineering standpoint. There were units in material and energy balance. Some of that content was going to flow down to this programming course. So you teach how to use these solvers with more and more sophistication, and you demonstrate that by using those examples. And so that then becomes, it's a programming course, if you will, but it's very chemical engineering focused as opposed to programming for programming's sake. And content was intended to be moved out of 317. R317, I'm sorry, which is listed down below in this column for UT. So I don't know how other institutions are integrating these courses now and content so that they're sure their students have the knowledge and skills coming into courses that are going to allow them to succeed in subsequent courses. And I'm only pointing out that we need to be mindful of that as we consider what in this engineering block to include or not include.
We've not really offered this. That's in the computer science area at Midland College. It does transfer, as you can see, to Texas Tech as an in the ACGM. I believe it's, I don't think it's C++ anymore, but I could be confused. I'm not a computer science person, so I don't know if it's CAD. I know we're looking at using like a Fab Lab kind of a thing in that course. So, but it's generic, I would say, and I would think most community colleges would have a pretty generic programming.
Yeah, certainly ours is generic. It feeds into chemical engineering, electrical engineering, and mechanical engineering. So the skills that you're learning are actually fairly generic, but it's not specifically applied to chemical engineering until you get into later courses. And then, yes, we spiral back and use those things as part of what we need to do for the other courses. Okay.
Okay, so if I look at the next course on the list is electrical circuits, and
Yeah.
I guess I'm hard pressed to see where this really has an intersection. Most programs in chemical engineering have eliminated those as a required course or core course. I should not use the word core, but as a course in their curriculum. So I don't know that there's much more to say about electrical circuits, and similarly, circuits and statics and dynamics is sort of working its way out of many chemical engineering curricula. Because it's
Takes up room.
well, I think the reason, I'll tell you why we moved it out, is few students take the EIT exam, and they need it for the EIT exam, and if they're not going to take the EIT exam, they get statics and dynamics to some level in physics, not enough, but they get it, and so it was removed. And I think that's been the logic at many chemical engineering programs. One course that, if someone has comments about any of these, please, punch your little red button and speak up.
So I will say, you still do see statics and dynamics at Kingsville, and that is still definitely on there. Right now, I'm not aware of our department making any change to that particular requirement, and it's just definitely taken as part of the, as a mechanical engineering course.
I have just one question. Do you teach a combined, or are you teaching a two-semester course?
No, it's a
Statics.
combined.
It's a combined.
Okay, the next course in the list is the Introduction to Chemical Engineering, ACGM 2333. And clearly, every chemical engineering program has to have an Introduction to Chemical Engineering course. But none of these courses map back to the AGCM equivalent.
That's because it's a pretty new course.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me just speak a little bit
So
to that.
please speak to
'Cause
that.
you know what? I teach that course, so I know a little bit about it. And the ACGM is very explicit about what we do, and it was actually arrived at through the tuning study. So it's UT, Texas A&M, all those other schools saying this is what you need to teach in that level of a course. Obviously, and I think it's very true, and one of our colleagues at the University of Houston said, even within their department, there's variability in how people teach things. So at least with an ACGM-based course, you're going to be getting at least that content. And so, I mean, personally, I'm way in favor of keeping this one. And, just going on and looking at the next one, Thermodynamics 1, I mean, you can see a problem right there. A lot of colleges, in order to save space for downstream, offerings, have gone from 2 semesters of thermodynamics, which everybody did back in the past, to many offering 1. I think UT offers only 1, right? So that would be, that would not be something I would recommend transferring. I mean, if you take it, great. You're going to be better prepared when you come to UT, because when you take that course, you ought to shine, because you're going to have a lot better basis. When you go to A&M Kingsville, it's the course, so it's not a problem. But I don't want to disadvantage a university by kind of forcing something like that down their throat.
So I do want to ask a couple of questions. So we have a course, so the Intro to Chemical Engineering, let me ask Dan and John, is that a course that involves material balances and then
Heavily.
Energy balances?
Heavily.
Introduction to energy balances? Okay, so so I have taught that course not at Kingsville. I taught it as an adjunct several years ago at a private university. But at Kingsville, for a long time, we are right now in a move, we are at the very beginning of considering a move to make that a 2-semester course of 1 semester of material balances and then a 2nd semester of energy balances, just based on where we're seeing our students perform in the courses that require those principles, the heat transfer and so on, that later down the line. So we're looking at maybe making that 2 courses instead of 1. We still do, on the thermodynamics, we still have a two-semester setup for that. And I don't know of anything about that being any changes being made to that particular approach at our university. I do see that if we keep our curriculum, if we edit our degree program and end up with 2 semesters of, we call the Intro to Chemical Engineering, we call it conservation principles. So if we have 2 semesters of conservation principles and keep 2 semesters of thermodynamics 1, we're just really, really jamming on the degree plan hours.
Yeah, I understand. That's kind of the issue. Well, I can really frankly say that these 2 courses are going to map perfectly to Kingsville. Yeah. And the reason is because I teach at Del Mar, and that's where a lot of our students go, and I work with your faculty to make sure that things would map just ideally. I use a different book than you use. I use a book of Murphy because it's much more mathematical, and she's also very much a chemist, and so it has more of a slant towards chemistry and chemical engineering. But to me, this is a course, if you went to two semesters of it, you'd have to grant 1 semester for this, and it'd have to probably take the 2nd semester. But this here really is so fundamental. Every engineer coming out of school better be able to do material balances across units, and they better be able to do heat balances across units. That's just, and that's the great, I'm getting on a pedestal here, but I'm going to say it anyway. That's one of the really good things about chemical engineering. They take that course at the beginning, which is really kind of a capstone course. When you get through that, you know what a chemical engineer is. And so all these other courses are able to fit into a framework. I wish other engineering fields could do that too. Okay, off my pedestal.
Okay, so maybe we can put that in as a recommendation. Let me comment on thermodynamics. Our thermodynamics course requires PChem as a prerequisite. So it's at a higher level than is implied by showing up as a second-year course. And I don't know about some of the other ones. I really don't. So that's the problem. Or if there's a 2 thermo sequence or 1 thermo sequence, and
So at Kingsville, if I remember correctly, PChem 1 is a co-requisite with Thermo 1. I believe that's the way we're doing it.
And since PChem is not something that's being recommended here, it's not up above in the chemistry, and it's not in the tuning documents. I think this gives me, that's why I think thermodynamics creates a problem if we look at the 4-year schools and not having the details of all the prerequisite requirements that they have.
So let me ask one other question. Is thermodynamics 1 something that is offered at the community college?
Yes.
Okay.
And accepted by University of Houston. One student who's accepted at, we had one student who's accepted at UT in chemical engineering, but then as soon as he got there, he traitorized and he became a mechanical engineer. So apologize about that, John.
But, so let me ask this, John. You have thermodynamics 1 is 322, so is that a sophomore course? Do students take it sophomore year?
No, that's taken, it shows up in the first semester of their junior year.
Okay.
But it's got a PChem requirement, and that's why it ends up there.
Okay.
So it's a co-requirement, right?
No, prerequisite.
Okay.
So how do they get to PChem so soon?
They come in with Chemistry 301.
That's exactly how. I knew that answer.
Only maybe. We are looking at the same pool of students.
Well, personally, I'm okay with not including thermodynamics 1 in the field of study because it's kind of, the schools that take it will take it, okay, and the schools that don't take it shouldn't have to be forced down their throat. For instance, A&M College Station would take it, but UT wouldn't, so I just don't think that it's worth an argument here. I think what we've been saying is we want to get a body which pretty much is going to be pretty clear, and people taking it, it's going to be pretty clear what they're going to be doing with it, going into chemical engineering.
Okay, so let me ask broadly if there's any more discussion on the engineering courses.
Well, I do have one question, and it's just a comment. I think what we ought to do with this Engineering 2304, which is engineering programming, I think we ought to, we can't do it here, but I think that's something that needs to be reviewed more from a chemical engineering discipline perspective. I'd like to see people get together and see if there's something common in that we could resurrect. And again, that's something we might want to change the ACGM for the chemical engineering side of it.
And when you say you want people to get together and review it from a ChemE perspective, are you talking about recommending that the course be reviewed through the ACGM process? That is the review that would be relevant to this committee. As far as individuals in the field doing it collectively, that would not feed into a process of ACGM revision.
I understand, okay.
I think that's the Engineering 2304. I see that as a fairly generic course. I mean, obviously others, I mean, I don't know. Texas Tech takes a pretty generic course. That's all I can say about that. The engineering course that I would really hate to see us lose, and I think I speak for most, if not all, community colleges, would be the intro class. I think that would be a terrible mistake to lose that.
Well, let me just add something that just, when we did an analysis for the combined engineering field of study, engineering 2304 has no equivalent for any of the engineering disciplines at UT Austin. And I think the reason for that is that there's very specific content that's written in, that's developed, each program. All right, some history. The computer science program wouldn't teach the courses that we wanted, so we brought these courses into engineering, and each department developed their own special flavor of, let's say, engineering programming. And for that reason, this course doesn't map over. So we don't have, there's no computer science course that you could look to inside of UT that we would say, yeah, take that instead of taking our course. So anyway, that's just the history of the course. Any other discussion of the engineering courses?
Again, I just want to remind us all that we have a recommendation from the greater field of study to look at 1201 specifically, okay, through the ACGM process. So it's not that we're saying no, it's just we're saying that it was too contentious for people to accept it as a generic course at this point in time. Do you agree with that, Mindy?
Yes, I do agree with that, Dan. The Civil Engineering Committee included it in their recommended curriculum on principle that it's a valuable course to community college students, but made some specific recommendations about things that needed to happen to it for it to be more applicable to their specific discipline. The Electrical Engineering Committee dropped it from the tuning curriculum as not broadly applicable enough to that major. So yes, it remains problematic across disciplines.
And we are potentially going to still go forward with that ACGM review of 1201, correct?
I believe that will be coming, and talk among staff currently is not waiting for the committee's recommendation, but perhaps to go ahead and initiate the process because it needs to be done. I do have a question. I just want to make sure I'm understanding your discussion of the engineering courses. The one course that you have general agreement about without having taken a formal vote is Intro to Chemical Engineering 2333. And the others remain more contentious, subject to your further discussion and decision. Now, I want to point out that that is one course, one engineering course. One concern about the engineering FOS is that if there are tracks, they have sufficient engineering courses in them that by the time the student has completed the field of study, the student is relatively at par with his or her university counterparts at the same level of completion. So I just do want to advise the committee that to the extent that you can consider more than 2333 as relevant to this disciplinary field of study track, that you should do so.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, I don't even see if without some engineering classes, you don't really have an engineering field of study. You have math and science.
Okay. I think what we need to do, well, I'm gonna make a suggestion. I think, and let's hear what your views are on this. I think we should go back to the top of the list and row by row, course by course, yays or nays that these courses should be included in the chemical engineering field of study. And so I guess the motion is, not that we, can I make a motion that we vote on each one of these individually with, and we record, we'll ask the recording secretary to record the yays or nays?
You certainly may take that approach. And you should proceed course by course then, if you take that approach, with the understanding, one of two understandings, that each course receiving a majority vote then becomes part of your recommended FOS, or by agreement that upon looking at each course, you will go ahead and recommend by a follow-up motion a body of courses to be the FOS. So if you decide to do it course by course, you need to understand in advance either that you're going to accept each course by the course into that FOS that you'll recommend for your discipline, or that you will go back by a second vote, which the other committees have done, and recommend the FOS as a whole.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what the second variation means. Can you give us an example, using chemistry block as an example here?
Sure, I will, and I'm sorry to be less than clear. Let me just ask you a question. Maybe I need to be clear. Are you suggesting that you consider each course one by one for inclusion or not in the FOS?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I was misunderstanding you. That renders my question moot, so please proceed.
Okay.
I have a request. I think we need to look at what the majority of the schools are requiring. I mean, that weighs heavily with me as to courses that the majority of these schools are using in their programs. It would seem to me that if the majority is using that course, then that is something that we should seriously consider to include in the FOS.
One of the things we did describe at the overall FOS committee meeting is we weren't trying to impinge upon academic freedom or whatever the abilities of the four-year schools to offer the programs they felt were the best for the students. We are two-year schools, feeding into it, but we're not trying to necessarily force the four-year schools to change their program to meet what we're trying to say. Okay, so that would speak a little bit against what you're saying.
Well, my concern is then we're not even going to have a field of study, I think. I think we could, you also don't want to gut what students can get at a community college.
Well, I think the issue with the field of study is as a receiving institution is that you would hope, my expectation as one of the potential receiving institutions is that these students, when they come in, that we can count that directly toward their degree, and not just that they have 3 more hours on their transcript. And I think from a sending institution, the objective is the same. Can people move through can they get their degree as fast as possible in this process and not be slowed down by repeating courses? And so that's our objective. Now, that the problem is when courses are on the list and then the receiving institution has to decide what 3 hours that's going to substitute for. And I don't think we're going to get all of those settled. So maybe the way we do this is we take the vote, yays or nays, on each of these courses, and then I think all of these recommendations are going to be folded forward to the main engineering committee, the larger master, I don't say master committee, the other committee that was formed originally. And then these somehow recommendations are going to go forward to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, and it's likely to be that each of the institutions can fire salvos at whatever recommendations come out of that.
The main committee's recommendations will ultimately go out for public comment, as the first proposal did. And as needed, if needed, the committee will come back to consider the public comments.
So I think, Margaret, I think it's at that point that the universities, the various universities and institutions will have an opportunity to say what their views are on how each of these field of study subdisciplines come, how their votes are, their recommendations. So we're just four. There are many more institutions of higher learning in the state of Texas, so we're representing four, and it's we're split down the middle between the four-year schools and two-year schools. But let's. I think we've sort of talked through these. If anyone has any other questions when I bring one of these up, I'd say that you have more questions about it before you're ready to vote. But I'd like to move forward. My motion is that we look at each of these row by row and start with organic chemistry 1411. So I guess inorganic, and I guess we're on. Wait a minute, where are we in the agenda?
We're still on 5.
No. We're still on 5?
Yes, we're still on 5.
Oh, come on.
Because we haven't made a recommendation yet.
If you move forward to consideration of the courses, if you're voting, you're on agenda item 6 then.
We're officially on agenda item 6.
Oh, my gosh.
Congratulations.
Okay, we're in the discussion and consideration of recommendations to the Engineering Field of Study Advisory Committee. So, course number 1 is Inorganic Chemistry 1.
Point of order. I'm sorry, John. You have a motion on the floor. You do not yet have a second.
Yes, I second it.
Very good. Thank you.
All in favor of the motion? Okay, here we go.
So we have 4 parties here that are voting? Is that right?
We don't vote.
Yeah.
And
if we don't vote, there'll be, it isn't going to work.
As we record votes, I don't have to record who is voting in which way. Just number count.
That is correct.
Okay, so those in favor of adding Inorganic Chemistry 1, Inorganic 1, ACGM 1411 to the Chemical Engineering Field of Study signify by raising your hand for an aye.
Can I make a point of order here, too? When I was making this up, I did not write the equivalences. There is an equivalence for almost all these courses that are 4 hours, which is an hour of lab and 3 hours of instruction. So let's just understand that when it says 1411, it means 1311 plus 1111, okay?
Very good. That work? Okay. So if you're in favor of adding this to the Chemical Engineering Field of Study, raise your hand to signify an aye. Okay, that's 2 ayes. If you're opposed, raise your hand to signify a nay. The 2 hands went up for a nay.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to move on to Inorganic 2. This is the AGCM 1412. If you're in favor of adding this to the Chemical Engineering Field of Study, raise your hand by signifying an aye. There are 4 hands that went up for aye. The next course is Organic Chemistry 1, Chemistry 2423. If you're in favor of adding this to the Chemical Engineering Field of Study, raise your hand to signify aye. There are 4 hands went up, unanimous. Inorganic Chemistry 2, this is AGCM 2425. If you're in favor of adding this to the Chemical Engineering Field of Study, raise your hand to signify aye. It can be right or left hand, it doesn't matter, okay. The physics was voted on by the main committees, and those were already adopted.
Don't we still have to do it for the subcommittee? Yes.
Let's go ahead and do it for the subcommittee. So if you're in favor of adding Physics 2425 to the AGCM 2425 to the Chemical Engineering Field of Study, raise a hand to signify aye. It's unanimous. If you're in favor of adding Physics 2, which is AGCM 2426, raise a hand to signify aye. Okay, unanimous. If you're in favor of adding Calculus 2413 to the, which is Calculus 1, to the Engineering Field of Study, raise your hand. Okay, that was unanimous. If you're in favor of adding Math Calculus 2, which is Math 2414, to the AGCM, raise your hand to signify aye. There are 4 hands went up. If you're in favor of adding Calculus 3, which is Math 2415 in the AGCM sequence, Calculus 3, raise your hand. 4 hands went up. If you're in favor of adding differential equations 2420 to the chemical engineering field of study, raise your hand. 2 hands went up. If you're opposed, raise your hand. 2 hands went up. Okay. So introduction, next course on the list is the Introduction to Engineering. This is the AGCM Engineering 1201. If you're in favor of adding this to the chemical engineering field of study, raise your hand. 2 hands went up. If you're opposed, raise your hand. If you're abstaining, you can abstain.
I just don't know.
Okay, so there's an abstention, I guess. Is that true? That's true. Okay.
Well, okay, let's go back and revote. I'm not going to, I can't do that. I can't abstain. Go back and ask for another vote, please.
Okay, so we're repeating the vote. If you're in favor of adding engineering, Introduction to Engineering to the chemical engineering field of study, this is ENGR 1201, to the chemical engineering field of study, raise your hand. 3 hands went up. If you're opposed, raise your hand. Okay.
With the caveat that we've already made before, right? That we're going to, okay.
If you're in favor of adding engineering programming, ENGR 2304, to the chemical engineering field of study, raise your hand. Okay, if you're opposed, hand. Okay. Electrical circuits, engineering to the chemical engineering field of study, this is ENGR 2305/2105, to the chemical engineering field of study, raise your hand. If you're opposed, raise your hand. Okay. 4 nays. If you're in favor of adding statics and dynamics, this is engineering 2303 or 2403 to the chemical engineering field of study, raise your hand. 1 hand is a yay. If you're opposed, raise your hand. 3 nays. If you're in favor of adding intro to chemical engineering, this is engineering 2333 to the chemical engineering field of study, raise your hand. Okay. 4 hands went up. 4 yays. If you're in favor of adding thermodynamics 1 to the chemical engineering field of study, this is engineering 2334, raise your hand. 2 hands went up. If you're opposed, raise your hand.
Okay, I've got to go with you guys because I teach it. Okay, 3 and 1.
3 and 1. Okay. We didn't talk about others, so there's really nothing to vote on other.
No.
So, can we have a summary of the yays and nays, please?
So you just want me to go back through that?
Well, okay, so the way I understand it, the unanimous ones were,
Were inorganic 2, organic 1, organic 2, physics 1 and physics 2, Cal 1, Cal 2, Cal 3, and intro to chemical engineering. Those were all the unanimous ones. You want me to go over the ones that passed? And then, of course, we had the ties.
Well, just go from the top then. Inorganic 1 was a
Was a tie,
2, okay.
and differential equations was a tie. Passed with 1 nay vote was Intro to Engineering 1201 and Engineering Program 2304, and Thermo 1. And did not pass was Electrical Circuits, and did not pass with 1 yay vote on Statics and Dynamics.
Okay. Right
So that's a
now,
summary.
I think we finished item number, I keep losing my agenda.
No, some of it. I had a couple of other points I wanted to raise.
Okay, so, I guess we move on to 7?
No, could we?
Wait a minute, I'm sorry. The chair yields to the chair.
Okay, one of the things I wanted to make as a recommendation, and propose that we make as a recommendation, is that the receiving institution for these things receive it at the same upper division or lower division level as what they would accept at the institution. Okay, I think that's an important point. Otherwise, it disadvantages the students. If you accept organic chemistry, you should accept organic chemistry. If it's considered an upper division at the receiving school, it should be counted as an upper division.
Dan, that goes beyond the statute. The receiving institution is required to accept it for credit toward the major. The statute does not stipulate how it shall be accepted for credit into the program.
Can we make that as a recommendation?
To your legislator.
Oh, okay.
I agree with you 1,000%.
Okay, Mindy or Gary, what's next here?
Well, let me make certain I understand. So then, the courses that you voted on that have passed with a majority or unanimously are recommended to be part of the chemical engineering track recommendation to the main committee.
That's our understanding.
Those that
because
are not, do not then go into it. If you have a recommendation for a disciplinary track for field of study, you have fulfilled your charge. Now, you are free as well to make any recommendations to the main committee within the bounds of the law, Dan, that you feel should go with your recommended disciplinary track FOS. Other than that, you really are free to, other than making other recommendations, you are free to adjourn at any time. You do not need to consider a subsequent meeting schedule. You will perhaps be asked to come together again if the main committee asks you to consider something further.
What about these courses that were tied? So do we send them on as a tie? Do we?
They did not pass with a majority, so they cannot go into the recommended field of study. You can, if you wish, indicate to the main committee that they were tied.
I would request that we do that, that we indicate it was tied.
I would suggest that if you want to make a recommendation of that to the main committee, that you need this motion and a second and an agreement to send it forward.
I so move.
I'll second.
A second.
Okay.
Okay, those in favor of Margaret's motion, which is to report the tie votes, right?
And there's two
Yes.
tie votes, differential equations and inorganic one. Those are the only ties.
Yes.
Okay.
Those in favor of Margaret's motion? Okay, that Margaret's motion was passed, so we will recommend that the full committee appreciate that there was a tie vote on inorganic one and on differential equations. And I gavel the meeting closed.
Not before I have an opportunity to thank you all for coming all this way to do this service for the state, for institutions of higher education and the students. I convey that thanks sincerely to all of you. Even John, who drove across town. That's an undertaking in and of itself these years.
And I want to go on the record as telling Margaret that I live west of I-35. All right, thank you, everyone, for, I'd like to, on behalf of Dan and I'd like to thank everyone for coming and being prepared to discuss this and being respectful of everyone's opinions as we discuss the issues. Thank you. I think we're adjourned.